And hi, and welcome to the Man You Wanna Be monthly Google Hangout. It's been a while, and I'm so excited that we are back. And as always, my co-host Dr. Vibe is ready to go. Dr. Vibe, say hello.
Hey, what is up, everybody? What is cracking?
And so tonight we are talking about re-engaging men of color in high school and life. And our guest tonight is Craig McClay, and he is a lead facilitator and advisor for America's Promise Alliance. And Craig also wrote a piece with the same title, Reengaging Men of Color in High School and Life, for the Good Men Project. And this, again, Man You Wanna Be is part of the Raising Boys section of the Good Men Project. So this will also be posted on the Good Men Project. Um, Craig has what he's done is he's led interviews with almost correct me if I'm right, 3,000 18 to 25-year-olds who
Well,
dropped out of school.
I actually conducted the focus group interviews with a little over 200 young people, and
Okay.
concurrently, we also did an online survey with the 3,000 young people, 1,000 of which had completed high school at one time.
Oh wow. And he created a report called "Don't Call Them Dropouts." So tonight we're talking about um, first of all, we're talking about the misconceptions that sometimes our society has about young people who drop out of school, and we're also talking about how do we re-engage them, how do we get young men excited about getting back in school, and what we can do as a community and a people. And we're going to get ready to start the conversation. And Dr. Vibe, do you want to say anything? Say hello before we get started. Talk about anything you're up to.
Well, you know what? First of all, it's great to be back on the Man You Wanna Be Google Monthly Hangouts. We took a little rest, but we're gonna come back, as they say, tougher than leather for the upcoming episodes. And it's always a pleasure and an honor and a privilege to be sharing this platform with you, Marie. And I really appreciate it. I don't take it for granted what I've been up to. The show keeps on going strong. The Dr. Vibe Show also still doing the hosting and co-producing of monthly Google Hangouts with Marie at the Good Men Project. Also, too, now some of my show is being featured on the Facebook page of the Black Life Coaches Network. Still getting featured weekly, weekly spot at the Good Men Project and other shows at the Good Men Project, and just entering in a new initiative with an organization called Tech Book Online, where we're going to be doing quarterly, what we call quarterly, what's it called? The Black Men not
Roundtable?
round table, not round table, town halls. Sorry,
Town
town
hall. Oh,
halls.
nice.
Yes, so we're starting the first one on September 27th, and shout out to everyone who's a supporter of the show. And with Tech Book Online, it has a reach of 100, potential reach of 100 million people.
Wow. Wow. Well, Dr. Vibe is, Dr. Vibe is on the money. He's doing his stuff.
Now, just
Um,
following you, Marie.
ah, I'm a slacker compared to you, both of you. One thing I have to say, we want to thank Craig McClay because he's a very busy man, and he took time out tonight to be with us and to talk about the work that he loves. And Craig, why don't you just, I gave a short introduction, so if you want to add anything about the work that you're currently doing with America's Promise Alliance, please do.
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered the major pieces here in the beginning, but last summer, a colleague and I went across the country to about 16 different cities, and we conducted about two focus groups in each city with young people who had their high school attendance interrupted. And we used a methodology that was developed at the Center for Teen Empowerment here in Boston that really kind of like, it wasn't your typical like, you got a group of people on one side of the mirror, and then you got some some other really smart people on the other side of the mirror eating M&Ms. It was a very engaging and I want to thank engaging process, and I want to thank all the young people for their authenticity and for opening up and sharing their stories in a very authentic way. They were very open, very candid, and they talked about things that they don't normally talk about with people, and I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Excellent. That's good stuff. That is really good stuff. Did we? Marie is
Oh,
on. There we
Dr. Vibe,
go.
do you want to get started with the questions, or you want me to get started? We can, however you want
Well,
to do it.
I like kicking it off. So hey, so first question or first conversation piece for you, Craig. What are some of the reasons that most young men drop out of school from your experience?
Well, the evidence, the findings that we came across from the conversations that we had with young people and the online surveys, there were four main areas here. The first area was that it was a cluster effect. In other words, there was no one factor that kind of pushed people out of school. I think the tendency is that we see one thing happen to a young person and just like, okay, that's why they dropped out. But I'm kind of reminded of the old adage of what broke the camel's back. Was that one straw? No, it was the million straws beneath it, and that's what we got to explore and excavate in these conversations with young people. So they were experiencing multiple things. I mean, things from poverty to homelessness to deaths in the family to health issues, personal health issues of close loved ones, and just like a plethora of things that they were dealing with. The second finding that we came across in the report was that excuse me, young people found themselves immersed in toxic environments, whether at home, the neighborhood where they lived, in school, neighborhood in the school, the travel, the path from home to school. Young people in some places said that they couldn't travel through gang territory without being hassled or jumped or their lives threatened. And that was I think that was a very important thing to kind of uncover. The third thing that we found is that young people, just like most people, they're yearning for connection, and they weren't getting connection in ways that was helping to lift them up, to raise them up. The connections that they were making were connections that were toxic in some ways, and that was also part of the reason that a lot of young people were not engaging in school. And then the last thing that we found is that young people were bouncing back and reaching up. They were resilient. They demonstrated grit. They were going through a multitude of issues, facing a lot of different adverse life circumstances, and still persevering to live the dream, to live the American dream.
Wow. One of the things I think, and we talked about this before we went live, is that a lot of times people have formed opinions of young people, particularly men of color who drop out of school. And there's this perception that, for some reason that their lives are going nowhere, that this was somebody who just didn't care about school. And what would you say are some of the misconceptions most people have about young men who drop out of school and that are wrong, that are incorrect rather?
Well, I think there's a few, right? There's the idea that young people, if they just persevered and just tried hard, demonstrated grit, that they could make it through. And I mean, I don't know if grittiest is a word, but the young people that we talked to were some of the grittiest young people in the world. They demonstrated time and again, bouncing back, pushing through obstacles that would, I mean, personally, I don't know if I would have made it through a lot of these things these young people were dealing with, and that's simply not true. Like they showed and they demonstrated it time and time again. I think another misconception that we have, not so much focus on young men, but is that the problems with the schools. The school is boring, and if we could just fix schools, then we would get to the source of this problem. But the truth of the matter is that young people are facing so many obstacles that school just becomes irrelevant to them. I mean, if you're facing homelessness, you're wondering where you're going to sleep tonight, it's kind of hard to focus on the Pythagorean theorem that the teacher's presenting to you. If your stomach is grumbling because you haven't eaten in a day or a couple of days, it's really hard to have someone screaming at you about finishing a report and turning it in with all of the the margins corrected and whatnot, because you are literally hungry, physically hungry. And I also think that another misconception that we have about young men, particularly of color, is that they look at their families. Their families aren't going anywhere. Their parents don't care about them. And I'm sorry to say that that's not true either. I've talked to young people that were talking about how they had been kicked out of school, and their parents went up to the school district and up to the school's principal's office for a year and a half trying to get them back into school. Now, if that's not demonstrating care, then I don't know what is. So, I mean, there are many others, but those are, I think, the main ones that I came across in the conversations that we conducted. with young people.
Nice. You had mentioned it, and it's a good segue to the next conversation piece in regards to how can schools re-engage young men who are on the brink of dropping out. And it seems that you said the schools have some responsibility that they're not living up to. And if you could share a little bit more in regards to that conversation piece, it would be great.
Yeah. What I After talking with young people, what I found in the programs that were working were young people were essentially being love bombed, if I can use that term. They were given the attention that they needed, that they required. There was a one-to-one relationship, a connection, an authentic connection. They found someone that actually cared about them. I remember one story in Providence, Rhode Island. A young man was talking about a teacher. He's comparing schools between his former school, the public school, and the school he was in now. And he talks about one teacher at the school he was in. He's like, the teacher will come over and just rub your back. And how could you just how can you refuse that? She actually went beyond the call of duty and saw that. In another case, a young man was telling me about how a teacher actually drove him out some distance out and had him, talk to an author because he was interested in becoming a writer. And he admitted that his own parents wouldn't necessarily do that for him. So this connection piece, I think, is huge. And schools are doing the best they can right now, with the resources that they have. However, I think that if we could get more of that authentic connection happening, that would work. And also getting to know the kid, through that authentic connection, understanding the ecology of this kid's life, understanding what home life is for him, understanding what he faces when he goes beyond the four walls of that school, and being able to address those concerns in a very caring and productive way. I remember one guy in Houston where a teacher actually told him, he didn't bring his homework in, and because his mom fell ill, she was the breadwinner of the household, and he has a couple siblings. He actually stopped going to school and started fixing bikes for kids so that he could make some money to bring into the house. And all of his money was going directly to things like food. We're talking like the base level of Maslow's hierarchy of needs here. Food, keeping the heat on, and a teacher told him well, can't somebody give you $1 or $2 so you can get on the bus and come to school and buy a poster? And the teacher didn't even realize that she could have been that person that gave him $1 or $2. So there's an understanding that these kids just aren't trying, and that's just wrong. They're trying, and it's a hard thing to say. Like, if you're living in poverty, to come to somebody and kind of, I don't have food. That's a very difficult thing to say, especially with someone who's looking at you, looking down at you, and looking for ways to penalize you over cumulative things, as opposed to actually trying to understand what's really beneath the surface there.
Marie, can I just build on what Craig has just shared? Sure. There's a few points I wanted to have Craig share a little bit more on. 2 points, two conversation pieces that come to my head. One, with the cutbacks that are happening in the education system, do you not think it's even going to be more and more challenging for schools to re-engage with these men?
I do, but I think that there's also a way we can kind of go about doing this a little bit differently. And different times, different challenges call for different measures. And we live in a very connected world now. We're seeing crowdsourcing take over. We're seeing many different things coming with the advent of technology, and if we can kind of tap into some of that, I think that we could be a little bit better off. Not saying that that's the only solution, but I think we have to kind of look beyond the traditional routes that we have been.
And one other point, I'm not trying to dominate here, Marie, I just want to get this point out that, especially in the elementary schools, 80% of the teachers that I've been told in the U.S. in elementary are, and no offense, white female teachers. How can engagement be improved when you have sometimes you have a difference in color and you also have a difference in gender?
Yeah, and also class as well. And it's not an unbridgeable passage, but again, if we start looking at different ways of trying to engage more teachers of color, more men of color in the field, I do feel that we could have a better chance at this. And everyone responds to incentives. So how do we kind of incentivize that? And also, like, not just incentivize it, but like kind of like, I mean, I'm here right now because of the people that have mentored me. So how do we kind of pay it forward, and kind of use that as a leverage to engage more men, particularly men, but also women of color as well. When these kids see people that look like them, then we touch upon hope, and that hope can fuel a lot. And I would hope that we can get to that place sometime in the not so distant future.
Thanks very much.
No,
Sorry,
thank
Marie.
you. Oh, no, no, no. I listen. This is our conversation. It's not the Marie show. This is all about sharing with the audience and getting people like Craig who are doing great work, getting his information out there. So no, Dr. Vibe, thank you. One of the things you touched on in your life, mentoring, and how that's helped you. How can well, there's two questions. Well, first question I wanted to ask you, you kind of answered it, which was what was most surprising about the reasons young people drop out, and you mentioned poverty and not having food, which is something that many of us take for granted. You know, we're able to get up and eat breakfast and go to school, so that is a big challenge for kids. How can mentors or men of color really make a difference in that aspect as far as helping when it comes to poverty? How can a mentor make a difference in the life of a young man?
Um, I would say, first of all, we're all mentors, and everyone has an opportunity to have an impact, a positive or a negative impact in someone's life. If we could take these opportunities a little bit more seriously to engage young men of color in particular, like again, it's something where I feel that at the center of all this is poverty, incarceration, and unemployment. But if a young man who's growing up in poverty sees another young man that looks like him handling things in a very positive and productive way, I'm not saying that's going to put food in that kid's mouth right away, but I am saying that that kid now has hope that he can or she can be greater than what she has gone through, what he has gone through in the past. And that to me, it's pretty powerful. That would be a first step. And then, I mean, the second step is, just kind of like looking at your neighborhood and thinking of that old, like it takes a village to raise a child, and we all have a part to play in that. So when you see something, do something. Do something to try to help support the young people that you see that may be, living through some adverse situations. I know for myself, I've when I was working here in Roxbury and Boston, Massachusetts, sometimes I would ask a kid to just help me pass off flyers and take them to McDonald's afterwards, or some place to just I know that this is a need for you, so let's go take care of this need, in a very dignified and human way, I think.
Excellent. That is good. That is good. What reasons are you hearing are young men going back to school after they drop out? What incentives or what impetus do they use to say, I want to get back into school, I want to get my GED or whatever form of education? What are they telling you for their reasons to go back to school?
Um, I would say there are a few. Family is big. Younger siblings, their own offsprings, their own children. A lot of people were saying that my friend was going to this re-engagement center and I just used to go with him, or they dragged me there, or this place was always here. I never knew what was inside. And one day I just kind of peeked my head in and I saw one of my friends there and I was like, hey, so this peer-to-peer network is very powerful. And then I would say probably family would be the other reason there. And I would also say that in addition to that, young people they're smart, and they see what's really happening. And at some point, sometimes it might take a crisis, unfortunately, a life crisis, that kind of pushes them over the edge. And sometimes it's just like a matter of like, you know what, man, I was just tired of sitting on the couch. Like there was nothing going on here, and I wanted something better for myself.
True.
I see my friends around me dropping like flies, or become felons or whatever it is, and I wanted something different for myself. And there happened to be a flyer, and the door was right there, and I went through it.
Cool. Cool.
Wow, that's simple. And you know, that's something that we don't think about, but that makes sense. You're sitting there and thinking, I know here in the Northeast we have a commercial where the guy says, "You're just sitting there, do something with your life, go back to school." So that makes sense that wanting to just being bored and just wanting to do something different. You mentioned it takes a village, to raise a child, and so I wonder what can communities do? Like how can not just the schools, but community organizations, churches, just others in the community that's not just parents, how can they come together to help young people that are thinking about dropping out? What can the ordinary person in the community do?
Well, the first thing I think is that when I think of the young people that we talk to, and their successes, it was usually not just like, okay, I went to this homeless shelter, they took care of my house situation, and okay, I was back in school. It's usually like a network of things working, like a positive youth development network, if you will, that fully supported the young person on their journey, to do whatever it is that they were trying to do. So first of all, I think we as a community need to come together and realize that the sum of our whole is greater than the sum of our parts, and we can do a lot better work around just unifying and supporting young people. The second thing that I would say is that in the conversations that we have with young people, one thing that it wasn't said explicitly, but it was kind of implied, I think, kind of like underneath the surface there, was that young people were when it worked, it was like they were in some sort of way like they someone said to them, someone who was not like obligated to take care of them and to help them along this journey came along and said, "I choose you." And that to me is big, it's huge, because again, here you got these kids that are getting negative messages from the media on down. Teachers are telling them things, their friends are telling them things, the media, I sorry, I said the media, but they're getting all these negative messages, and for someone to kind of peer through that and say, hey, you know what, I see a light in you, like I'm going to treat you, you remind me, I'm going to treat you like you're my child. That goes a long way in a young person's life who's had so many adverse challenges coming up. And then the third thing that I would say, Maria, is just taking the time to listen deeply, like really listening to what the young people are saying, because they're saying some pretty profound things, and those things deserve our ears and attention, and quite honestly, a little bit of sweat equity, elbow grease, some work to help them through these challenges.
I,
I just want to, can
Go
I just
ahead.
say one thing, Dr. Vibe?
No,
Because
go ahead.
something you touched on it. I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and people were just talking and talking about what we need to do for young men, and that what you just said was one of the missing pieces is listening. Is I think sometimes we as adults feel the need to tell and to advise and guide instead of asking and then waiting and listening to the response of what they need. We're so eager to help, but sometimes the help that we're offering may not be what they need, and that the only way to really get to the bottom of their needs is to listen. That's something so profound. And also letting them be seen. I once asked a group of people, when a young person steps on the elevator or anything, do you acknowledge them with a smile or say hello? Because that's important. We focus so much on them being respectful to us, but how about our respect to them? Like, do you
Amen.
make them feel that they're important? And something as simple as a smile or a greeting can just change a young person's life, but it's something that we don't think about as adults because we're so busy making it a one-way relationship where you should respect me, but I don't necessarily have to respect you. and which is unfair, but it also it triggers things in them too, where they feel like if I'm not being seen, I'm going to do something so you can see me or you can hear me because you don't want to. So I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, that's a very good point, man. Thank you.
Craig, you've been involved in this, and I call for you out, this passion for a long time. And
Yes.
how has the environment changed, good, bad, or not over the, we won't say how long because you did tell us before you came on live on the show, but how has the environment changed since you
Uh,
got started?
I think one of the main things is that we did this study, which is probably like one of the largest study with this population to date, and it's turning, the tide is turning where people are actually starting to do what Marie just said, which is we're actually starting to engage young people in real ways and really listen to their voices, listen to their ideas, encourage their skills and talents in ways that we haven't done, at least not at this level before. I mean, technology obviously is a has a major impact in the field and where we kind of go about business. And I also think that a lot of funding streams are actually encouraging organizations to work together to actually serve the population that we're talking about here. And yeah, that's kind of like some quick and dirty
No problem.
change.
I have another conversation piece in. What is the state of the community, in your opinion, right now?
Can you go a little bit further with that question? What do you mean?
You see that you're seeing change, but again, we hear different stories from different, of course, media sources. Are you encouraged by what you're seeing the community doing these days? Does it encourage you?
Um, I would say yes and no. Um, I mean, you take a look at what's happening in Ferguson right now, and that's not encouraging at all. That's discouraging and hurtful. Um, but I look at some of the places where we did conduct these focus group interviews, and that's very encouraging. People are pulling together. People are taking the time to listen to young people. Organizations are actually incorporating the voice of young people in more authentic and real ways. Um, and it's kind of a mixed bag, depending on where you are and what perspective you are looking at the community from. But I think that if we take an opportunity, this opportunity to kind of raise up those opportunities and those programs that are working, then we can kind of start moving the meter a bit in a positive direction. I'm big on perception, and if we can kind of get to that, like, I hate to say it like this, but this glass half full scenario. Because I mean, think about it. Like right now, America is at an all-time high with the graduation rate. We're at 80%, and that's progress from the last 10 years, and that's huge. And we should celebrate that progress, and not only celebrate it, but we need to let the entire world know about it, because there are a lot of people that are thinking that the school system is just going downward, and it's a terrible downward spiral. But there are a number of examples of schools that are excelling, that are doing well, and we need to commend that and really, really appreciate and praise and publicize the progress that is being made.
I just wanted to build on that. You mentioned Ferguson. Have you had any conversations with young men about Ferguson? And if you have, what have they been saying to you?
I haven't had any conversations with young men about Ferguson as of yet. And I mean, I'm barely talking about this with my friends, because it's like a Molotov cocktail in conversation. It just sets people off, and that's not the image that I want to like put out there. I want us to be thoughtful about this. I want us to be respectful and responsive, not reactionary. And I want to again, engage people in conversation around it, and really, it takes time. Like building relationships takes time and energy, but the power of the change that I'm looking for is based upon us building those relationships, deep and meaningful relationships, and it starts by listening.
Good stuff, Marie.
That was great. And you're right. It's not the time to be reactionary. It's time to be reflective and really think about what are you going to say to young people and how do you address this, because I'm sure they have a lot of questions about this too. I want to take it a different route and talk about how we as parents can influence and help, particularly young men of color. And I think about something that Mike Brown's mother mentioned about how she struggled, like she worked hard with just to get him to graduate, and here he was going to college. And that's something I hear often from moms of boys, especially when they get into high school, probably like middle school and high school. There seems to be this disconnect with the school. And what can parents do when you put aside some of the challenges you talk about, when there's not poverty, where there's not some kind of abuse or neglect in the home, but where they're coming from a home where parents are engaged and involved, but there's still that, again, that disconnect with school. What do you think? What do you think parents can do to keep their sons focused?
Um, I think that, again, listening is a very first and a very important step. Um, I think helping young men um, work through the emotional aspect of life, um, and that's a challenge because it's like how do we first of all just kind of get a hold of our own emotions, and then become aware of another person's emotions in a way that we can deal with our emotions and their emotions and kind of move things forward. Um, but I think that emotional working with the emotional intelligence would be huge, in terms of parents connecting with young people, and being able to suggest things that the young person actually listens to. So and it can start at any point, but I think that if you started off obviously younger, then they grow into these patterns of being able to deal with a lot of emotional stress. And like the conversations about with young people, I can't. I mean, I won't quantify how many times because I can't. How many times I heard young people say, "I was just angry. I'm angry," and I was so angry, and the first thing I think of is that the second you become angry, you stop thinking, and you're angry about something that requires thinking. So we're living in this paradox where people are literally putting their worst foot forward because of the emotional avalanche that's kind of taking over. Whereas if we learn to better kind of identify these emotions, deal with these emotions, and use them what they're meant to be, which is the emotion is telling you something's wrong, but you got to push that aside now that you know that something is wrong and engage what's between your ears to actually deal with what's wrong. Um, and that's a challenge. That's just like a huge challenge. Um, and I think that there are a lot of parents out there that are doing the right things. There are a lot of caring adults that are trying to do the best. But I would say for parents that if you're struggling with an issue with your kid, get help. Like there are professionals out there that can lend a hand in terms of emotional regulation or helping get a kid back in school, or there's a whole spectrum of things that you can get help with. But I would say, again, it's about creating that network. I don't think that any one person can do it all, but I think that we all can do something. And if we can get that network happening, it would be huge. I know for me, growing up, my mom, single mom, she threw me into everything. I mean, I was on a debate team. I was at church like 3, 4 nights out of the week. I was the only non-Asian on the Asian club. Like she made sure that I had these other influences around me because she knew that she couldn't provide it all.
Well, you know what? I just have one more conversation. I just really a statement because I can understand your perspective because my father was a teacher for 32 years in the same public school, in the same classroom. And I
Wow.
spent, yeah, and I spent some time in the education system myself. And I look at the education system as a triangle that you've got the school on top, you've got the parents in one corner, and the kids, the youth in another corner. And it's like when they're equilibrium, when they're at the 60 degrees each, everything is just right.
Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
good stuff.
Yeah. That is.
Excellent. Well, I'm gonna let. I like to say, Marie, do you have anything else you want to ask Craig? He's knocked it out of the park.
Uh, I mean, you did an awesome job, Craig. And one of the things I have to say is that your passion for your work is reflected in how you speak and in in the work that you do, the research that you've done. We're always happy when we talk to people who are not talking a game, but actually doing the work and are happy and excited about it. And so we thank you. We thank you for the work that you do, but also that these young people have someone like you in their corner because you are part of that 80%. You contribute to that because of the work you do. So thank you for everything that you do and for being on the show today and talking to us about this. You gave us so many things. I couldn't keep up. I couldn't even tweet everything because you were so good. But I got some stuff out there.
Great,
Actually,
awesome. And I want to say I'm
actually,
really grateful to you two as well for the opportunity to kind of present this information because as we were talking before we went online, that this doesn't necessarily make it to everyone's ears, and having the opportunity to kind of raise up the voices of young people that are seldom heard and often actually pushed out and ignored is a great opportunity. And I also want to thank America's Promise Alliance for doing its work and the Center for Promise for their work in this as well. There's a team of great people that are right next to me. Actually, they're in front of me doing this stuff. And I just want to acknowledge all of them and the great work that they're doing and the spirit that they bring to the work that they do as well.
Craig, I have one last conversation piece I want you to share with our audience tonight. In that, what message do you have to our parents, to our school system, to our community that we should give or say to our young men?
Uh, well, before you say anything, I would say just bring down the valence of any misconceptions or any stereotypes that you may have of a young man that you may be looking at, because there's a lot more to the person. I would say the second thing is before you speak again, humanize that person. They're not a it. They're not a that. They are not a number. It's a human soul that deserves dignity and respect that everyone gets. And then the third thing that I would say is that when you do say something, be sure to listen deeply and ask questions about their story. Really listen. Be present. Forget about the Twitter, the Facebook, and the cell phone for a minute. Be present. Ask questions. Summarize their story for them. And just remember that it is a human life, and you actually have a chance to have a profound positive impact on this young person's life with every passing moment. So don't take that for granted. And then, the other thing I would say is that if you can't do it, then find someone that can, because there are people out there that are looking for opportunities to help young people. And if we can just create that network, again, having that web to support young people is huge.
Done deal. Marie?
Like I said, I'm gonna borrow Dr. Vibe's words. Knocked it out of the park, the ballpark, Craig. You did a great job tonight. And we'd love to have you back and to have another conversation. Just I don't think we can just stop here with this one. I think we need to have you back when you've done some more work, and if you want to come back and share with us what you've learned, especially after the situation in Ferguson. If you'd like to come back and talk about that'd be great, or anything. We think people like you are really the ones that need to be highlighted, and your work needs to be again just put out there. So thank you so much. Anything you want to share with our audience, how they can connect with you, find out more about what you're doing, where you are on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, pay a visit to the America's Promise Alliance website, americaspromise.org, gradnation.org. Check out the video that's there. It's produced by America's Promise Alliance. It's a great video. It actually highlights some of the stories of young people. I can be found at, Craig M at americaspromise.org, or just Craig McClay at gmail.com. And yeah, just keep your ear to the ground and stay connected with Dr. Vibe and Marie Roker-Jones and continue doing all the good work that you're doing because there are opportunities and we're starving for it. It's like this is like a glass of water in the desert and we want to hit the oasis.
Wow.
Well, one thing I want to say is I hope to see more articles from you on the Good Men Project. I know you did a first piece, so I'd love to have you contribute more, particularly to the Raising Boys section. So please, if there's anything you ever want to share, please just email. You can email me or you can email Elisa Ward, who's the editor that works with me in the section, and let us know, hey, I want to share this anytime. We're more than happy to support the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Marie. And I'd be glad to come back and contribute as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much, folks. Have a good night.
Dr. Vibe, did you want to say anything?
Just like to say, Craig, your money, and that's your money. And thank you again, Marie, for allowing me to share and grow with you. It's appreciated and not taken for granted. And I'm looking forward to many more conversations to come with outstanding individuals like Craig, who are the right people at the right time doing the right thing.
That was awesome. So the only thing I'm going to add is that we actually will be back next week with another Man You Want to Be conversation. So tune in next Wednesday, the 27th, or to Thursday, the 28th. I'm sorry, at 9 p.m. So we'll see you there. And Craig, thank you again. Have a good night, everyone.